Catfishing is when a person creates a fake identity, often with corresponding social media accounts, phone numbers, photos, and addresses targeting a specific victim for abuse or fraud. These catfishers are organized, patient, and have a playbook that they follow to gain the trust of their target over the course of weeks, months, or even years. Affected receivers even get advice from other scammers on how to proceed for their own success. Today's guest is David McClellan. David was an internet marketer and website builder for over 10 years. He ran and executed SEO strategies for CNET, where he added 1.4 billion visitors to the portfolio. He branched out as a visionary and entrepreneur 6 years ago when he created socialcatfish.com. This website became the fastest growing company in Riverside, California, and is an Inc. 500 company. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey Podcast. All right, David, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey Podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. Can you give me a little background about who you are and how you started Social Catfish?
Yeah, so I'm an internet marketer by trade. I've been an internet marketer for over 10 years and now turned into an entrepreneur. We own socialcatfish.com, and socialcatfish.com has been on for 6 years now. We're the fastest growing company in Riverside County in California, and we're the 112th fastest growing company in the nation right now, according to Inc. magazine. And we originally started this. So back in the day when we were when I say we, my business partner and I at the time were getting started, we would build websites and flip them, and we, build them up, build traffic and flip them. And we heard about the phenomenon like catfishing. And so we're like, we don't know how we're going to make money from this, but let's build something to educate people on catfishing, because there was nothing out there at the time. Like, I don't even think there may have been a Wikipedia page at the time. Mm-hmm. And so, we built this website and we built up a bunch of resources. And like, I built a lot of websites before, and without doing a lot of marketing, you're really not going to get a lot of traffic. And so like right away, like without doing any marketing, we started getting hundreds of comments. And, like every week, when we started out, we were getting maybe, 100 comments a week. Then it turned into like 100 comments a day of people that were running through this. And we didn't really know how to like monetize it, being entrepreneurs. And so we're like, you know what, let's help people find out if they're being catfished, and we'll do research. And we didn't know what we're going to charge. So we put a button on our website for $6. And or so it was like $6 or $7 at the time. And literally within 5 minutes of doing that, we got our like first sale. And we're like, okay, well now we actually have to like help these people out and do it. And, and being internet marketers and you've been in the internet industry, you learn to do a lot of research and your due diligence and all these different things when you're buying websites and all this stuff. So we already had a lot of these tools. And so we started off just like taking orders for $7 and doing the work. And then we're like, this is not enough money. It's a lot of work. So I think we changed it to like $35. But one of the biggest things we learned at the time, we actually would get on the phone with these people and like hear their stories and like what they were going through and also the stories that these scammers were telling them and the emotions that were involved. And we decided to build a service around that. And so we started building all these tools and these different services. And so, there's a lot of other people search websites out there. And, we built like an image search, that goes along with it. And tools that we have, we've, built similar tools to our competitors, but we've catered them more toward like online dating and helping people protect themselves online. And a year and a half ago, we decided we have to do a little bit more, like to help these people out. They're like, them coming to the site, yeah, they can look up the information, but we have to be able to do something else for these people. So we started like a YouTube channel and started profiling different stories and educating people, what it's like to go through this, educating people about different scams and exactly how they work and break, we'd break them down. We'd interview scammers. And we even gotten like a playbook from these scammers, like the exact playbook they use when they scam people. And then we built like kind of a consumer watch group. So on Facebook, we have this watch group where people go and they drop the images and different things. And these like mob of like men and women go in there and they help each other out. It's like really great. And so we've had that for like a year and a half now. There's almost 4,000 members in the group. And so that's kind of where we are today.
That's amazing. I love to hear these stories of, well, we just built it and hoped something would happen. Oh my gosh, something's happening. What do we do? It's kind of similar to my own story with whatismyipaddress.com. So for the audience, can you offer some clarity? Is there a difference between catfishing and romance scams, or are they the same thing?
They're similar. So romance scams are typically part of catfishing. So when you're catfishing somebody, you're trying to pretend to be somebody else, right? So you steal somebody's pictures, maybe their persona, their lifestyle, and you either use their name or a different name, and you tell people you're that person. So with romance scams, the same thing happens, except these people are trying to get money out of you. So they go and they make you fall in love with them using these fake personas, and then they go and steal money, as much money as they can from you.
Yeah, that's crazy. So are there any particular stories that stand out in your mind as just the most either upsetting or just kind of amazing stories that you've heard? Yeah,
lots of them. So a few of them that stick out. So we had talked to a lawyer a few years back. She's a prominent lawyer in the New York area, and she had worked in tax law, and so she was online dating, and she met a guy that said he had tax problems. And so she related a lot to the things he was going through, having his bank accounts frozen and everything else. And he said he was this entrepreneur and he was working on this monster contract, and he sent her all this proof of this contract with millions of dollars. Couldn't, complete this contract because he didn't have money for equipment and different things because his accounts were frozen. So, after falling in love with him, this lady, she goes and she starts putting money in boxes, $70,000 cash in boxes, and she'd wrap him in clothes and she'd mail him off to Nigeria where this person said he was at. And she sent 10 boxes before the FBI had actually scanned one of the boxes, and they reach out to her and they're like, "What are you doing?" And she goes and she's like, "Well, I'm talking to this guy online. Here's what's going on, blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "No, you're being scammed." And this educated, prominent lawyer just finally realized what was going on, and they end up putting a tracking device in the box and sending it over to the location. And this person opens the box, takes everything out. They track it back to basically his doorstep, and they contact the government, say, "Hey, look, we have this guy. Here's what's going on." And the government's like, "Well, we'll look into it." And so nothing happened. And then she kind of went through this mourning period, and she's like, I'm going to try to contact this guy. Maybe there's something there. And so she goes to our site. She finds out who the real person is using the image.
And by the guy, you're talking about whose identity was used for the scam?
Yeah, absolutely. Gotcha. So these scammers, they'll steal somebody else's identity using their pictures, and they'll pretend to be that person. So she looked up who the real person was, and then she was able to find contact info and reach out to him. And he said, I'm in a relationship, I'm good, and kind of let things be. Well, a few months later, he reached back out to her and he's like, "Hey, you know what? Maybe we can meet." And so they lived about 6 hours apart. They drove halfway in between, and went on a date and started dating. And, they were dating for 4 or 5 months, when we heard this story. And so that's one of the crazier ones. We have another story where this lady had gone through cancer the exact same time her husband had. And so she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and the exact same time her husband had a terminal brain cancer. And so over a 2-year period, she basically took care of her husband while dealing with chemo at the same time, but her husband was starting to wither away because his cancer was terminal. And the same day that she had her last chemo treatment, where you go and ring the bell, because your last chemo treatment, that was the same day her husband passed away. And so she dealt with all these crazy emotions, and she had this guy next to her every day for 32 years. And all the friends that used to hang out with were people they would hang out with as couples. They go watch football and do all these different things together. And because she didn't have her significant other, she's over a period of time stopped getting invited, to those parties, to those, dinners, all those different things. And so she reached out to online dating to see if she could, find somebody. And she meets this, second guy she meets ends up being the scammer that fell in love with her really quickly and took everything from her. He said he was like selling cars. So like he was in like Latin America selling cars, and he would use that and say, oh, I need to pay for customs and I need to do this. And he's like, dear, when I get back, my accounts are frozen. I'll pay you back. And so this went on for 8 months. And they were talking for hours every day. So this is, a lot of people are like, well, how can you give somebody money you've never met? Like these scammers will sit there and they'll talk to you for 4 or 5 hours a day, because for them, especially if they're overseas in like in Nigeria, right? Like if they make $10,000 a year there, that's an insane amount of money. So if they're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, they'll spend as much time on the phone with you, as you want.
Yeah.
And so she ended up, mortgaging her house to a company that rented it back to her. She gave her retirement. They had savings. She gave this guy that. And she ended up selling her house, giving him most of that money. And we had asked her, like, what caused you to give him this money? And she's like, it turned to, it evolved to the point where like, I felt like if I didn't give him the money, he wasn't coming back to the US, because I kind of still believed his story. And then, she had told a few people and they said, oh, you're getting scammed. And it was almost to also prove to them that they were wrong. Mm-hmm. And, she just went down this dark path. And, we have like another story. We had this lady who met this guy, and she was in her relationship before that. It was an abusive relationship. And she also had issues where she couldn't have kids. And this scammer had used this child that he said he had to like build a bond. And every time like she didn't want to give money or like he'd have her talk to his daughter and play games on the phone with the daughter. And so she built this relationship with this kid and really became attached. And so she gave over $100,000 to the scammer. And it was a point where, he secluded her from friends and family. And she was in like really deep depression to the point where she felt like she was going to commit suicide. And she goes and confesses this to him and says, look, I need you to be honest with me. I need you to come back. I need you. I have nobody else. I'm about to commit suicide and I have no more money to give you. And he tells her, you got to do what you got to do.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So there's a few of the crazy stories. I mean, there's a lot more, but those are a few of the crazier stories we've heard.
So let's kind of work into this backwards a little bit, and we'll kind of not do this in a traditional order. What are some of the behaviors that you see from the scammers towards their victims? I noticed that like you even mentioned it there, that they were kind of separating the victim from their family and friends, just slowly isolating them. Are there other behaviors that are kind of consistent that you see from scammers?
Are you talking about while they're like engaged with you, or before or after? Or?
Let's start with while they're engaging with you. So once you've already started the relationship with them or started interacting with them, what are the kind of the behaviors that they use to manipulate people? So
there's a lot of like emotional manipulation that goes on. So if you don't give money, they become emotionally abusive, and they also look like the victims they prey the most on are people that are vulnerable to this. And so, there'll be emotional abuse and be like, look, this is why you're alone. This is why you can't have anybody, you can't trust me, all these different things. And they'll always throw it back on you. They'll also, I want to say like the good scam, but like the scammers that are experienced,
the effective ones,
right? The effective ones. They will seclude you from your friends and family because they know your friends and family have your back and they're going to look out for you. And so they're going to talk to you constantly. They're going to be in your ear all the time, telling you, hey, look, they're wrong. We're going to be together. I love you, all this. And then they are always setting up a story. There's always a storyline that they're setting up. So they're building up excuse why they're asking you for money and nobody else. Sometimes they're getting other people involved. So some examples of that, they'll tell you they're widowed or their parents passed away. So when they ask you for money, they'll say, look, the people closest to me are gone. I don't have anybody else, even if they're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. They usually have like a child that's involved, and so they work all those angles and they really try to pull on those heartstrings. We're seeing actually like a different trend, like say over the last like year and a half, where the effective scammers are actually sending gifts now. Like they'll send you a gift And so like they'll send you balloons or flowers or a teddy bear or a fake ring, from Amazon. And, so it costs them $10-20, which they're probably stealing money to get that. But it's to build trust. And so these people we're talking to, they're like, well, I didn't think it was a scammer at all because they sent me something before they asked for it.
Yeah.
And so, we're definitely seeing a trend there, and there's always a reason. And so if they need money for, to get home, right? They'll ask you for $5,000 to get home. If you can't get $5,000, they're like, you know what? I was actually able to find $3,500. I just need $1,500. So they'll almost talk you down. Basically, I've interviewed scammers and talked to them, and I said, hey, if you don't get money, like, what do you do? And they're like, no, we get money. Like, that's not like, we will get something out of you. Like that's the way they look at us. And they even call like their victims, they call them clients. That's how they think and talk about people. And there's like forums, and there's even like Facebook groups where you can look up these people. And when they talk about their victims, they say, hey, I need help with this client. I need this for this client. And that's how they refer to them. And so those are some of the things that they'll do to kind of keep you in this web and do it. Another big thing they'll do, and we've seen this over the last few years, they'll reveal themselves. So they'll come out, and there's like little fear, right? Like, because the government is so corrupt, especially in like countries like Africa, like there's not a lot of fear that these people are going to get in trouble and get caught. And so they will reveal themselves and say, hey, look, I was doing it. I really fell in love with you. And they'll be like, but I'm in this country and I'm so poor. I need you to send me money. Or I need you, my friend's going to send you money. I need you to send it to me. Or I'm working on this other client and I need you to do a video for me, to help the client believe it. And I just need this money because it's so poor and I have nothing. I have no food, nothing, anything. And these people are so used to talking to the scammer every single day that we've actually talked to like men and women, and mainly women. They say, look, it was that person that was there to talk to me every day. And I've literally talked to people. They're like, look, I have tons of friends. I have lots of friends. I go hang out with friends every single day, but I don't have that male figure in my life, or I don't have that female figure in my life. And that's like a basic human need that everybody has. And so, I've even heard people say, look, like, I don't regret giving money because I at least had that person in my life during this dark time in my life. So it's really interesting how everything plays out, and, different needs from like men and women, because they're very different, like the women tend to, they really want to have that conversation and talk, and feel good about themselves, so have people tell them they're beautiful, and the men are different. It's typically like more sexual in nature, where, they meet women that, their images are usually stolen from porn stars or those types of people. And they'll leverage that part of it to steal money from men. So it's very different, men and women. Like users that actually come to the site, it's actually pretty close to 50-50, but people that actually come out about this, it's mainly women. And I think because men are typically embarrassed to talk about this.
Yeah. I think there's a general view. I think that the men should be, and maybe because those relationships, quote unquote relationships, are a little more sexual in nature, there's more negative public consequences and something like that. People don't necessarily view the men as victims in quite the same way as maybe the women would. There was it was interesting because I was recently talking with a woman who, I forget how I ended up getting in contact with her, but she was a real estate agent. And she was contacted by a man who was a disabled person in a wheelchair who was looking to rent a new place because his girlfriend was going to come visit.
Yeah.
And, she as the real estate agent was like, after hearing enough details, she's like, I think this guy's like, he's being scammed. Like, it's a total scam. And so she sent me some of the materials, and like you said, I found the woman's photo. It was lifted from, some porn actress lifted from her site. Right. And, she goes back to him and says, hey, this is a scam. And he's like, no, it can't possibly be a scam. And so she ends up like calling the local police in her town and says like, hey, can you do a welfare check on this guy and just make sure he's okay and talk to him about this? Because it's like, she goes, I don't know what the scam is, but she goes, it just felt wrong from the beginning when he told me the story. Okay. But it's the same sort of thing. He didn't have people in his life, and this person presented themselves as being available, wanting to come and visit, wanting to come and talk. And I don't know whose apartment was going to get paid for or how, but
yeah.
But it was really neat to like hear the story from a third party person of someone who just happened to be on the periphery of this story and cared enough about this guy to get involved and try to do something and try to help him from becoming more of a victim. Yeah,
we definitely talk to third parties. I think it's difficult for them because most of the time these people are blinded, and there's certain types of people that makes you like more susceptible to these types of scams. So people that are lonely, people that are depressed, they're widowed, they're divorced. Those are the people, like they're the prime targets for these scammers, but it really includes everybody. I've talked to married people. I've talked to, there's not to go on, with too many stories, but there's actually, I just thought of one that we recently talked to. This is a guy that, he's like 65 years old, and he's talking to this like 25-year-old woman from San Diego. Like she's really from San Diego. We found the account, and she's lied to him for the last 2 years, and she sent him a Photoshop picture of him and her, and told him they got married. And he mounted this picture on his wall, and it's like a 4 foot wide, like it's like a big portrait picture. And she sent him this fake marriage certificate, and she had him call a number to verify that it was real. And this is a guy that, he can't see very well. She's just definitely taking advantage of this person. And so he comes to us and we're like, look, like none of this is real. And we're giving all this proof, and he still doesn't believe us. And, just some people, you want to help so badly, but they're not willing to be open,
Yeah. There was one of the first episodes that I did for the podcast was I was interviewing Jeffrey Hazlett, who's a Fortune 500 CEO, and his images have been used in this ongoing romance scams and catfishing. Like he gets emails weekly from either victims or family members of victims. For years, he's gotten this of like, right. Can you help convince my family member that like you're not really dating them? And he's like, and so he's now like part of his mission is like talking to these people and saying, look, it's not me. I'm happily married. I have kids. I have grandkids.
Right.
I am not contacting you on Facebook. I don't do that. I'm not having an affair with you. And like the stories that he was telling, to the lengths that the scammers would go through, was pretty interesting. One of the things that like, the advice I had often given people is like, well, you want proof of life, at least at minimum.
Yeah.
Get on a Skype video, FaceTime, some sort of interactive real-time video. And he says, well, what they've started to do, because he's a fairly public person, he's been on a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of videos of him out there. The person will play the video, but no audio. And then they'll start and stop the video, talk over it. And I'm having problems. I'm at the airport. I'm having problems. Let me just shut down the video and I'll talk with you. So it's like, oh my gosh, even like the whole concept of like, well, just have a video conversation is not even as a reliable method of confirming these things now.
Well, there's a few issues with that, right? Like the first is, like when you get on and like somebody replays a video and it's blurry or grainy, like, especially if you're in love, you start ignoring these things. Right. And there's new technology out called Deepfake technology. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah. Like you can go and I could film this. I could like record this podcast and I could basically make you say whatever I want you to say. I could call your mom up and say, hey mom, I'm stuck in prison and I need you to send $5,000 to me ASAP. And she would hear your voice and I could type everything in and make you talk. It's really scary, the technology is out. And some of these are like open source. Like you can go create this stuff right now. and we've talked to lots of people that have sworn up and down they've talked to these people, they've sent us the videos, and it's the same thing. These videos are either dubbed over or they're silent. We had a lady yesterday that sent us this video, and it was this guy that didn't even have his mouth open, and the scammer was like talking. And I told her, I'm like, his mouth's not moving. And she's like, I think you can kind of see it moving. And they're just so brainwashed, unfortunately, We actually work with a lot of people that have their images stolen. And so earlier this year, we started realizing how bad of a problem that is. And these people are victims too. And so, we work with a lot of military people and, gay models and, people that, work on ships, those are like the prime targets. And these people have their images stolen all the time. And so what we do is we work with them, charge them anything. We monitor their images every week, and we work to get them taken down. And so it's not a service that our company provides, but we just do it because, it's the right thing to do, and we have resources, and we realize like what these people go through, because all these, you hear about the victims and it's really sad what happens to them, but these people that have their images stolen, they're victims too. And like you said with the other guy, like it's part of their life now. They wake up with, 100 DMs every morning, people swearing up and down that that's them. Some of them are scared. Some of them are like, look, I've had people show up on my doorstep. There was a story, I want to say like 2 years ago, where this guy was scammed by this woman, and he was catfished, right, by these woman's pictures, found out who the real person was, showed up to her doorstep and killed her.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and because he was so convinced that it was really her. And so, a lot of times people don't know what's reality and what isn't, because, like everything's based on a lie.
Gotcha. So are there any other kind of telltale signs, if we're starting to get to the like videos can be faked, what are the telltale signs in your mind of things that people should be aware of, particularly like with where things are trending?
Yeah. So you can always go back to basics, right? So if somebody randomly contacts you, especially social media, dating websites, they're targeting like any type of chat app right now. So even the games that you play, like Words with Friends, where you can chat with people, they're targeting those now because people have their guard down. Even a lot of people think if they're on a paid dating website that, these scammers are not, like, they're just as bad on like, Christian Mingle and Match.com. And so if somebody randomly messages you, they fall in love with you relatively quickly, and then they ask you for some form of money, whether it's gift card, whether it's cash, whether it's Bitcoin, anything, and especially if they go outside the network. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll take you from like a dating site or social network onto like Google Hangouts as an example, or WhatsApp. And the reason they do this is they're scamming like 50 to 100 people at one time. They're working on 50 to 100 people at one time. And so people find out and report their profiles. They get taken down. They change pictures, all these different things. Well, if they take you over to, WhatsApp or Google Hangouts, they don't have to worry about their profile being taken down, from this dating site that they're on or this app that they're on. So those are like telltale signs. If somebody asks to wire you money, so just because somebody asks to send you money doesn't mean they're not trying to scam you. And so you can get in trouble with like money laundering, and that's like stuff you don't want to do. I have a buddy that's a cop, and he's like, we arrest people like this all day long, and they have no idea, and they get in trouble for it, and so you have to be really careful with stuff like that. And it's not just you sending money, it's other people sending money to you and you forwarding that money to other people. So those are like the big telltale signs. The scams kind of evolve, and there's different variations of them. But anytime anybody asks you for anything like that, those are like big red flags.
Yeah. What do you have any idea of what the normal time is from when like an introduction between a scammer and his client, we'll use that terminology, when that first interaction happens until when the scam happens? What's kind of that average amount of time?
Yeah, usually 90 days.
Okay.
They'll ask for money within 90 days. We've definitely had scammers go way long. We've had scammers go like 8 or 9 months, or like a year and a half. And it's been as short as a week. So I think it really just depends on how far they feel they've gotten with you. And there's different types of scammers. So sometimes you'll be talking to somebody and then you're like, this person sounds different now, And what we found out is these scammers, there's different types of scammers. There's people that are really good at finding like their victims, or their quote unquote clients. And there's other people that are better at the conversation part. And so what they'll do is they'll team up and be like, okay, I'm going to find you these victims. I'll get them going, and then I'll hand them over to you. And you just give me a percentage of what you get. And in the background, that's happening all the time. Anytime you send money, the person that's accepting the money is taking a percentage and giving it to the scammer. Or, if there's somebody at the top that's helping these scammers out, whether they're giving them a playbook or coaching them or whatever, and they're taking money off the top. And this is happening all over the place. It's really crazy.
Yeah. Last week, I was interviewing a reformed cyber criminal, and he ran a cybercrime empire. And he was talking not about this in scams necessarily, but he was talking about with hackers and people selling data, is that you might have someone who's really good at obtaining data, but they're really bad about selling it on the open market. So he was in the business of helping to facilitate getting the people that were good with the data, getting it to the people who are good at selling it, with the people that were good at marketing it.
Right.
And it was the same sort of thing, that information and that scam, or that, the criminal activity was just being passed around from one entity to another, who were good in that one little aspect of it.
I heard, I watched a podcast like a few weeks ago, and one of the things the guy was talking about, he's like, the white collar crime, like you really don't get in that much trouble for it. He's like, I was in jail with people that were in jail for like 6 or 12 years, and they stole $200 million from people. And versus you go and you're on the street and you're selling drugs, you get 25 years. And so these criminals, they're like, well, if I get caught, I just want to try to steal as much money as I can in the meantime. And I'll be out in 3 years or 6 years or 10 years, and I can get a buttload of money.
Yeah, that it really does seem to be the case that financial crimes are not treated nearly as seriously as in-person crimes, let's say.
Right.
The embezzlement, I was, just published an episode about embezzlement, and something like 75-80% of embezzlement cases never even get reported to the police because people are embarrassed by it, or it was a family member. They like the person, and they just, as long as they're not around my business anymore, I'm okay. Not thinking, well, they're going to go do it somewhere else.
So there was $200 million lost last year for romance scams. And we talk to people every day. We have our groups that we, work with, and it's the same thing. I mean, I would say like 80 to 85% of people don't report these scams. So sometimes it's a small amount, like $25. Sometimes it's $250,000, and they're too embarrassed to report it. And so that's why, $200 million is a lot, but if you have only 15 to 25% of the people actually reporting it, it's a lot more than what it is.
Yeah, that number is probably significantly higher. How often are you dealing with or seeing governments and law enforcement just like, no, we're not interested, or we're just not going to do anything about it? I mean, obviously, Nigeria is kind of the king of this place, but do you even see that domestically?
Yeah, we see it a lot, unfortunately. So what the problem is if you ask me for money and I give you money, it's a civil issue, right? So if you don't pay me back, I take you to court. Well, there's really, and there are some states that have some that are coming up with laws to combat this, but it's really not illegal to give somebody money, right? And there's doing it under false pretenses and identity theft and other things, but it's not illegal to give somebody money. And so when these people go to the police and report it, a lot of times, the police can't do anything about it, because they're like, well, it's a civil issue, take them to court, or they're like, well, you shouldn't have done that. And so we always recommend, though, going to the police and reporting it, whether they do anything or not. You have to report it. And then also reporting it to the FBI. You have the Internet Crime Complaint Center, report it there. Because what happens is if enough people report it and there's enough breadcrumbs, all these scammers leave breadcrumbs, right? So whether it's like usernames or images or phone numbers or emails or whatever they use, eventually some of these people are going to get caught up and make mistakes. And, we often see where they leverage people in the US, or sometimes there's just people in the US that are involved in this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we had a case probably like 3 years ago where this lady contacted us, and, we helped her find out she was being catfished, and we gave her all the information. And then we're like, look, go to the police. And so she went to the police, she contacted a detective, and super brilliant detective. He tells her to tell the scam, he starts getting involved, and I think she had given like $5,000. So it was a lot of money, but not as much as we've seen some people lose. And so the scammer was asking for more money. And so the detective told her to tell the scammer, hey, my bank, I don't have any money in my bank account because I gave you all my money. I have money in my investment account and I can't transfer the money because I have no money in my bank account. And because he had asked for $50,000 after that. And she's like, I have $150,000. I have plenty of money. I just can't access it because I don't have access. I don't have any money in my account. I'm actually negative. So after like 3 weeks of this scammer saying, I need you to do it, I need you to do it, he has somebody go into a bank and wire like $1,500 to her so that she has money in her account so she can transfer it. And so they actually filmed somebody walking into a bank in Texas. And, I don't know what happened after that, but, there's people in the US that are helping other people out. Sometimes they're victims. Sometimes they know exactly what they're doing. But for sure, always report it. And unfortunately, a lot of people report it and when you report it, it's probably not going to give you closure, right?
Yeah.
But it might help somebody else out, and it might give the FBI just enough information to actually put something together and put some people in jail or slow them down or whatever the case be. Or at very minimum, now we know that there's $100 million being lost every year, and politicians are getting involved and seeing how important this is, and dating sites and social networks are actually starting to realize. So, I mean, I believe that the way to combat this is education. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be these scammers out here, but if we can educate people about this, if we can show them the signs, if we can help them feel empowered. We interviewed somebody last week, and during the interview, she was very smart, by the way, very smart woman. She had talked to this scammer, and he had given her information to transfer, money to. So she called the bank and she did all this due diligence, but she's like, I don't know anything about the internet. I'm 65 years old. And so she's like, I called the bank and I called all these people, and they're like, yeah, that's a real account and blah, blah, blah. But she never Googled the name or ran the picture. She didn't know anything about that. Yeah. And so she ended up sending this guy, I want to say $20,000. But now she knows how to run an image search, and she feels super empowered now. And even though she lost the money, she's like, I just feel this new knowledge that I have, and I feel almost powerful. And then she feels great. And so if we can empower people and teach them how to do this, and to protect themselves, that's the key. When you go to school, they teach you about drugs, right?
Yep.
And they teach you about finance, and they teach you about oh yeah. Well, and they teach you how to take out student loan, lots of money in student loans. But they teach you all the basics, right?
Yeah.
But they don't teach you about internet safety. And the internet's the wild, wild west. And you and I, being internet entrepreneurs, the internet's still the wild, wild west. And if you look at how the internet's changed and shifted, involved in algorithms and ad networks and all these different things that have changed over the years, they were 5 years ago, they were very primitive. Now they're significantly more advanced. And 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're probably going to have an internet that's way more sophisticated than what it is today.
But sure.
But we're not teaching that in schools in most cases. And that's what needs to change. And we need to work on try to educate people as much as we can.
And the good thing is, I think corporations and banks are now starting to at least have some stopgap measures in place for these sort of things. I was recently, a while back, transferring money to a family member overseas, and had set up a new bank account to do it because my local bank doesn't do international SWIFT transfer. It gets complicated. Right. But so I had set up a new bank account just to be able to send money overseas. And so I deposited money in the account, let it sit for a couple of days so the bank's happy with it, went online, sent the wire, and a couple of days later, someone from the bank calls and says, "Hey, this is so-and-so from the bank, and we see that you're sending a wire transfer. Have you met the person that you're sending it to?"
Yeah.
And the anti-scam side of me was like, "Oh, this is awesome! This is so cool!" And I was really impressed. The lady from the bank, I had to jump through hoops with her. It wasn't just "Hey, do you know who you're sending the money to?" "Yeah, you sure you got the account number right?" "Yeah, okay, good luck." And it was "Well, who is this? Have you met them? How do you know this is an account this is a legitimate account number for them, and that it wasn't someone who intercepted an email or pretended to be them?" She had 20 or probably 20 questions for me that were really good, legitimate, are you really, really, really sure that you're sending the money to who you think you are? Because once we send it, it's not coming back. So it was like cool to see that the banks are actually starting to do something about it from their perspective, and not just, oh, you told us to wire money. Okay, we're going to wire money.
Right. Yeah. We spoke to a lady about a month ago who that's how she found out she was being scammed. The banker's like, hey, like, I hate to tell you, but you are being scammed. This is a romance scam. And so we're definitely seeing that more and more. It's really spotty though, because it's only as good, even though the procedures in place, like even like sites or companies like Western Union, and they have procedures in place to do this. But I've sent money through Western Union, and I actually put the wrong name, because it was overseas, and I was paying like a freelancer, and I wrote the name wrong, and he still got the money, and so it's only as good as the people that are on the other end. But like I even saw, this was like about a month ago too, on Facebook, I had like a random person message me, and there was like on the top of that message in Facebook Messenger, it said, hey, be careful about messaging people you don't know. And it talked about scams. And so, I mean, I think more and more these businesses and websites are seeing like what's happening, and they're actually doing something about it. Because like, if you really think like Facebook, that's probably the last thing they think about, right? It's like the business around, and they're running ads, and the government's calling them to go testify and all this fun stuff. But now they're dealing with like scams and trying to figure out, like, they're a social network. Now they're trying to figure out how to keep people from being scammed. And so, I definitely think a lot of these businesses and sites can do more, but things are still like the wild, wild west. And a lot of them are just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And the scammers are getting better. I had an interview with Jim Browning, who runs a real popular YouTube channel on tech support scams. Mm-hmm. And they're running like these scam call centers are like you talked about. They have playbooks. They grade the scammer boss grades the guys that are working for him. And if you're not getting enough money, you get fired. But what he said is like one of the things that he found that he was able to get out of their network, he hacked in and got some of their files, was that they had a whole list of like instructions on how to coach people when they get those phone calls from the bank, or when they go to 7-Eleven and buy, $3,000 of iTunes gift cards.
Right.
They now have a coaching to tell the client, well, here's what you tell the person behind the counter, that you're buying gift cards for your office or for your family for Christmas if they ask you, because, some elaborate story as to why they do that. Yeah. But they're now starting to coach the victims how to talk to the bank to let the transfers go through. So it's getting scary.
Yeah. We've seen where like they'll message each other about exchange rates for gift cards. So they're like, hey, don't use Google Play because the exchange rates aren't very good on them. Use iTunes or use Steam. And so they're even doing stuff like that. So it's not primitive, like it's very like advanced stuff. And I mean, they're masking their IP addresses, and so even like Facebook, we were talking about this last week, where like Facebook, there's all these things they look at. I have no doubt, determine if its account's real or not. Well, these people are changing their IPs and all these different things to make sure that, that these people where they say they are, and probably flag anything on their account. They're even buying seasoned accounts. So these guys will go and say, hey, look, I need a Facebook account that's 8 years old and has 25 friends or whatever. And so they're buying these Facebook accounts to scam other people. And so they're very like the people that are effective. I mean, they're very experienced and they know what they're doing. And it's this whole network that's working together. It's not just one person.
Yeah. It's not just some random guy in his garage scamming you. Yeah. It's organized business. It's organized crime.
Right. Absolutely.
That's absolutely crazy. So if people want to find out more, actually, I have one question. The Facebook group that you mentioned, how can people find that Facebook group to get help if they think they're a victim of catfishing, or if they have a family member who's a victim?
Yeah. So it's, you can just search for SCF Seekers on Facebook. It stands for Social Catfish Seekers. It's a private group, and you have to answer a questionnaire, and we try to do our due diligence, before people join it. So make sure and fill out that questionnaire. You won't be allowed in the group. So go there, and it's a really good support group where, people it's about information. It's not about judging. It's not about what you've been through. It's about, hey, let's provide people with really good information and educate them on what's going on.
Gotcha. And if people want to find out more about you or catfish.com, sorry, where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can go to socialcatfish.com and check us out. It's a self-serve service, or they can hire us to help them out. We also have Social Catfish on Instagram and Facebook. And then we have a YouTube channel called Catfished, where we, highlight stories of people that have been gone through romance scams, or people have had their images stolen, and educate people about those too.
Great. David, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Absolutely. Chris, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Prey podcast. If you found this episode educational to help others from being catfished, please share this episode and leave a review at easyprey.com/review. Notes and a transcript of this episode with David McClellan can be found at easyprey.com/50.